Hi everyone, welcome. Thank you so kindly for joining us. Welcome to Green Apple Books on the Park. My name is Car Johnson. I'm the event coordinator for Green Apple. And tonight I am very happy to welcome Eric Puchner as we celebrate his novel Dream State. Let's give Eric a hand. Eric, welcome to the Bay Area. Eric is joined tonight by Adam Johnson. Let's give Adam a hand as well. Thank you all so much for coming. I know the weather was unpredictable, and so you risked it, and I appreciate that about all of you. Thank you for joining us on a Monday evening. Thank you for joining us in person as well, and also online. Hello, online audience. I'm waving to a camera if you can't see. We are broadcasting from San Francisco, California. We open each of our events with a land acknowledgement, and so I would like to let you know that we are operating on unceded Ramaytush Ohlone land, and we think that acknowledgement requires action, and so we encourage you to donate either your time or your monetary means to an Indigenous organization each time you hear a land acknowledgement. We have details about how to do so at the back desk, specifically info directing you to the Ramaytush Ohlone Land Trust. So if you are interested in how to participate in this project of rematriation, we have details there. Very brief business before I let these two take over. Now is a good time to silence your cell phones if you have not already. Eric and Adam, how do we feel about picture taking? I didn't ask. Photos? Thumbs up. It's okay. Encouraged even. But no bad photos. That's not allowed. You can't take bad photos of our authors. Please do check out our full event calendar online at greenapplebooks.com. We have a really great season ahead of us, including the event you are currently attending. And please do buy books if you are able. We always appreciate it. We have books by both of our authors here tonight. If you've been here before, you've certainly heard me say that when you buy books from us, not only do you support us as an independent bookstore, you support the writers who put so much work into making these books, and then you get to have a book, which might be the best part. So if you are able, we always appreciate it. Thank you so kindly. Without further ado, let me give you a little lay of land and what you are going to hear this evening. We're going to hear a little bit from Dream State from Eric at the top. Adam will come and join him in conversation, ask some questions, and then we will open the floor to you all with your questions. How does that sound? Cool. Yeah, you've been here before, you know. Anyway, without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce the first author who's joining us tonight. I'm going to introduce Adam, but we're going to see him later. Adam Johnson is the author of Fortune Smiles, winner of the National Book Award and the Story Prize, as well as The Orphan Master's Son, winner of the Pulitzer Prize and the Dayton Literary Peace Prize, as well as the California Book Award. He is the author of the short story collection Emporium and the novel Parasites Like Us. Johnson teaches creative writing at Stanford University and lives in San Francisco with his wife and children. His novel, The Wayfinder, is forthcoming from MCD in October of this year. Let's give one hand for Adam Johnson. And last but most certainly not least, Eric Puchner is the author of the story collections Music Through the Floor and Last Day on Earth, as well as the novel Model Home, which is a finalist for the PEN/Faulkner Award in Fiction. He's received an award in literature from the American Academy of Arts and Letters. He's an associate professor in the writing seminars at Johns Hopkins University and lives in Baltimore with his wife, the novelist Catherine Knoll, and their two children. His latest novel, Dream State, is the reason we are here tonight. Let's give one more hand for Eric Puchner.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you, all of you, for coming. It's so nice to see so many familiar faces. So, listening to all of Adam's accolades and the fact that he has a book coming out in October, I was like, well, there we go. Now I'm not going to win an award. I'm going to compete with him. Can they give him another award? So, this is a novel that came out in February. I'll just give you a sort of very, very brief synopsis. It's so hard to talk about what a book is about. You know, I've had to come up with a kind of elevator pitch for the book. And I hate doing it. I just really hate doing it because when someone says, what is your book about? You really can't explain what it's about. I mean, what a book is about the experience of reading the book, right? That's what your book's about, the emotional experience of reading it and the aesthetic experience of reading it. So it always feels, when I try to describe it, it always feels trite. to even, especially when you start talking about the themes of the book. So I'm going to avoid that. But I will say, just to give you a little background, I'll read something from the book just for a few minutes here, just a few paragraphs if I can find it. But the book is set in Montana. It's a place that my wife and I have been going to for 25 years. Every summer we go to Montana to this house that has been in my wife's family for years. It was my father-in-law's, the house in the book, although it's not actually the house that we go to every summer. But the house in the book is very much based on my father-in-law's place. It was built by his grandfather at the turn of the century. His grandfather was a Lithuanian Jew who came to Montana and was completely destitute. He actually lived in a packing crate in Glasgow, Montana for a while, and the way that he survived was that the trains would come through Glasgow and they would throw him coal so that he could burn it and warm himself in the winter. And he ended up starting a dry goods store in the back of a saloon and became a kind of self-made middle-class man. And then eventually he hired a contractor who was a complete drunk to build this house that we go to every summer, which is on Flathead Lake in northwestern Montana, not too far from Glacier National Park. And apparently it took him about 5 years to build because he was a drunk, and whenever a contractor comes to the house and takes a look, they're like, oh my, well, there's not a right angle in the entire house. Like, what is this place? So it's also a place, when we say, oh, we spend our summers in Montana at this house, people have this idea of this kind of idyllic place in the middle of the woods that's, on Flathead Lake, and we have direct access to the lake, but it's nothing like that at all. There are houses on either side of us, like as far as that Reed poster right there. There's a libertarian guy who lives right here who actually, the driveway to our house is actually an easement on his property, so he's constantly setting up cones to tell us if we have, trespassed. And there's also they built a major highway. The way people get to Missoula from Kalispell is they go down this highway that separates us from the lake, and so there are all these enormous logging trucks and motorcycles flying by, and there's a sort of a blind turn. So to get to the lake, you have to run like hell across the road to make sure you don't get hit. That said, it's like my favorite place on earth, and partly because it's my favorite place on earth. It's flawed in that way. So I knew I wanted to write a book that had that particular setting because it's so important to me. And I also, the other sort of seed of the book was that I was asked to officiate a wedding. And I won't tell you whose wedding it was, but half the wedding party was felled by norovirus. I don't know if you've had norovirus before, but it's like the worst 2 days of your life. And the one thing about norovirus is that it comes on, you're feeling totally fine, and then you throw up, just out of the blue. So at this wedding, there was a flower girl, one of the flower girls threw up on her way down the aisle. And the poor groom was so ill, he had to sit down during his vows and fight the urge to throw up. And when I was thinking about the novel, but also when I think about anything that I write, short stories as well, I often think about comic situations, not because I want people to laugh out loud, although I think that's a fine thing to do when you're reading a book, but because comedy is all about there being a disconnect between expectation and actuality, and that's also what good fiction is all about. I mean, when you laugh at a book, it means the book is working, I think, because it's doing exactly what you expect good fiction to do, is to create that incongruity or tension between expectation and actuality. So I'm always drawn to that when I'm thinking of ideas. So I was drawn to this wedding, this awful, funny wedding. So I knew that was going to happen at some point in the book, and I knew it was going to be some kind of fulcrum, and that after the wedding, everything was going to be different. I just wasn't sure quite how when I began the book. So Cece is one of the main characters of the book. She's engaged. At the opening of the book, she's engaged to be married to Charlie, who's a cardiac anesthesiologist, and he lives in LA. He stayed home while she goes out to Montana to this house that she also loves. It's in Charlie's family, to plan their wedding. So she's there a month early. And Charlie, because he's sort of wedded to the OR in LA, he asks his best friend from college, Garrett, who's going through a hard time. He has never really recovered from the death of one of his best friends in college. and feels he holds himself kind of personally responsible for it, and has dropped out of college and is working as a baggage handler in Montana. Charlie enlists this guy Garrett to check in on Cece and make sure everything's going okay, and that's a big mistake. The book spans 50 years, so this is just the beginning of the book. It's interested in this house over time, but it's also interested in a sort of stunning betrayal that happens, and tracing how this stunning betrayal haunts the lives of the three main characters that I just described, but also the lives of their children. It's interested in not just sort of like the individual mistakes that we make in life and the regret we may feel because of them, but also the collective mistakes that we make as a generation and the regret we might feel because of that. Give me 1 second, because Adam, I didn't know I was going to be reading first before Adam got up here. Let me find. I thought I would, just to give you a sense of the situation as I just described it and how it complicates. Garrett, Charlie's friend, ends up taking Cece hiking in Glacier National Park, and they return. Garrett thinks that Cece hates him, but he has to use the bathroom, so he runs into the house briefly after he drops her off after this kind of disastrous hike that they've been on. And Cece serves him some wine because she's testing the wine for the wedding. In fact, I remember, Andy, you came to our house. And at my own wedding, Andy Greer came and helped us choose the wine for our wedding. So he goes inside and they drink a few glasses of wine, maybe a few too many glasses of wine, and Garrett gets kind of drunk. And then Charlie calls, and Cece goes upstairs with the phone call, and Garrett decides, now I'm going to leave. This has gone too far. I'm going to go home. So he runs out of the house when Cece isn't watching. Garrett climbed into the truck, steadying himself, then dropped his keys before he could get them into the ignition. He switched on the dome light and found them sitting in the thermos he'd parked in the cup holder. They were soaking in the coffee at the bottom. He tried to retrieve them with his fingers from the heel tap of coffee, but the thermos was too narrow. He drank the cold coffee, extracting the keys with his teeth. When he glanced up again through the windshield, Cece had reappeared downstairs. She searched the living room, then stuck her head into the kitchen. How wonderful this was, to be looked for. He was invisible. He could spy on her from this vehicle. Then she opened the front door and went out to the porch and saw him because, of course, he wasn't invisible. He was sitting in a truck with the dome light on. For no earthly reason, Cece pretended not to notice him and then picked up the binoculars from the table and pointed them in his direction, jumping back as though she'd seen a bear. A dopey thing, a joke, and yet all was lost. It was like a compass finding north, a happiness as pure and sudden as that. She even looked different. New and strange and somehow in focus. The wild shrub of hair, the slanty jack-o'-lantern eyebrows, the dimple in her chin that looked like a poke. None of these features was particularly attractive. On their own, in fact, they were sort of funny looking. But put together, they were beautiful, heart-walloping, a face he'd missed his whole life without knowing it. Cece, who lowered the binoculars, stared at him in concern. Garrett realized he still had the keys in his teeth. He dropped them in his lap, like a golden retriever. I have to go, he shouted, essentially to himself. He had some trouble hand-eyeing the key into its slot. Then he switched off the dome light and reversed down the driveway and backed into a corner of the fence, which made a sound like a firecracker. Garrett sped off in his truck, then slowed once he realized how fast he was going. The empty road seemed to dangle in front of him. Good God, what had he done? The moon, that lighthouse in the sky, guided him home. I'm sorry, he said to Charlie in his head, because he damaged something and couldn't remember feeling so happy. I was going to read a passage about grief, but I decided that was a better, more festive passage to read.
Hey, it's good to see you.
You too.
Can people hear us?
Yes.
I think the sound system here is pretty rich. I feel like I'm on NPR or something.
I'm very close to the mic. Is that okay?
It's good.
Yeah, okay.
You know what I like, just admiring you from where I was listening to you, is the voice of you. Like your humor, your charm, your intelligence, like that's on the page. And you know, when I read your book last summer, I think, I was just like catching up with an old friend. Like I really felt like I was encountering you, you know. And sometimes I feel like a pressure as a writer to inhabit a voice or sensibility like beyond my own. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
I just kind of love that the you-ness is centered in your book.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Is this what this is going to be like?
You
You're going
can
to praise me, and I'm just going to say, I like this. This is fun. Thank you.
Hey, you've been on the road. You've been meeting readers, visiting bookstores. Not every town has a bookstore as great as this one. What's the state of American letters? How's it going? What's happening out there?
I knew I should have picked a different interlocutor.
What have you found from the field?
I don't think I'm in any position to say what the state of American letters is.
Are people still in love with books? Are bookstores thriving?
I think they are. Yeah. They definitely are. You know, there's an independent bookstore in the book. There's a wonderful independent bookstore, actually two independent bookstores owned by a good friend of mine in Baltimore. And so when I was researching the book, without giving any spoilers away, it's so tough with this book because it's so easy to give spoilers away. But one of the characters becomes an independent bookstore owner. So I spent a long time talking to my good friend Emma, who owns two wonderful bookstores. And, you know, it really heartened me to hear, how passionate she was about her bookstores, but also that it was doing well in Baltimore, which is a surprisingly literary town. But I mean, I don't know how many bookstores I've been to on this tour, but a lot. And yeah, they seem to be really thriving, doing better than ever, it seems.
It seems to me like there was a day not too long ago where everyone was partly a reader, and now there are tribes. That's your tribe. You're a reader, and you're a committed reader, and you care about books, and you show up, and you come to things like this. And
well, one thing I'll say is that Tom Barbash here, an old friend of mine, and I had been talking for years about starting a male book club, right? And because men don't, the men read one book a year, and it's like a biography of Abraham Lincoln. I should say straight men, right? I think that other forms of maleness is different, but so we had been talking about it, and then I was doing a reading in San Diego, and a male book club came. I was so happy, and the guy who was the most talkative admitted to crying when reading my book, and I was like, yes, I've succeeded. That made me really happy that I made a grown man cry.
That's a beautiful story. If you'd like to invite me into your male book club, I pre-accept.
I'm not sure you're manly enough, but
well, tell me about. You talked a little bit about some of the occasions of the book, but you've got some pretty serious concerns in it. The concerns of maybe a more mature person, more mature writer who's trying to write a bigger book. If you ask me, the fourth book is the charm. If you're still struggling with your first or second, I would just skip to the fourth, because that's where you, where you go for it.
Are you saying they shouldn't read my first three books?
Oh, are they here for sale?
What is your question exactly?
Wow. Oh, that turned fast. That went south fast. This book spans decades. Not an easy thing to do. I mean, there's for that range and that scope and that long view of your characters' lives, their landscapes, their arcs, there's a lot of narrative challenges that come with that, but also like this, an ability at a certain point in life to see life, that a story could never handle, and that maybe even a previous book couldn't handle.
Mm-hmm.
Did you say, hey, I'm at a certain place in life, I just want to write a bigger book that does more?
Yeah, well, thank you. In all seriousness, thank you for that. It means a lot to me. Yeah, I did think, this is my fourth book. I've written three. I'm an associate professor. I have tenure. If I'm going to go for it, I'm just going to go for it now. I don't know if that was sort of how conscious that was, but I did feel a kind of liberation. I'm able to support my family. It's not sort of a desperate trollop situation where I have to publish every year to support myself because I don't have another job. And I knew I was going to have both the time, and I felt like I had this sort of energy while I was still relatively, young, meaning in middle-aged, that I would be able to take on a larger project. But I love books that span large periods of time, large swaths of time. Like, there's nothing as powerful to me as a book in which the antagonist is time. For whatever reason, I love that. It's my favorite theme. And I also love books that are about houses. Like, I love the house novel. I don't know why. I've just always been really drawn to the house novel. Like, To the Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf is one of my favorite books. I love James Salter's Light Years. I mean, Beloved is a kind of house novel. There's so many that I love, and there's something incredibly poignant to me about characters in a book or characters in the world, real human beings in the world, building a house because it's this gesture towards permanency, right? It's like, I'm going to build a permanent home on Earth. But of course, we all know that you can't build a permanent home on Earth because we're just passing through and we're going to grow old and die and leave. And so that poignancy, that juxtaposition between the house, the effort to make a permanent home, and our bodily failure to achieve permanence on Earth, I just find that really, really beautiful and poignant. Especially now, I was thinking with global warming and with environmental devastation, particularly environmental devastation going on in the West, homes are more vulnerable than ever, and they also stake no claim to permanence. So I was really interested in that. And I could only do that if I spanned 50 years. And the second 2/3 of the book jumps around in time a lot. I elided a lot of chapters, so you in one chapter you're in one time frame, and the next chapter maybe 15 years have gone by, and I do that repeatedly. And I very consciously wanted to achieve that effect. That actually, I was just talking to my old friends from college at dinner. We were talking about how we couldn't believe that our kids were as old as they were, and that 10 years had elapsed. And that's exactly the surprise. I wanted to surprise the characters and the reader by skipping over a bunch of time, and then you're in the next chapter, like, whoa, oh my God, 15 years has elapsed. When did that happen? I was doing a podcast with somebody, and I wish I could remember the exact formula, but it was really brilliant. He had heard that there's a mathematical formula, the first 20 years of your life are actually 40 human years, and then as you get older, they start to diminish. And then the last 20 of your years feels like 5, like you enter a different reverse space-time continuum, and that's sort of the effect that I was after.
Well, we live in a time in which human time is being scrunched into, or geologic time is being scrunched into human time. Mm. And so in your book, changes in glaciation and forestry and the water cycle that would normally be visible over centuries or millennia become visible in your book.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
You want to speak to that?
That sounded like a definitive statement. Yeah, I mean, very much I wanted to wed the personal, I guess you would call it the political, I don't know. The book spans 50 years. It starts in 2004, and so it goes into the future, and that's something that made me very, very nervous. I'm not a science fiction writer, and I have no interest in predicting the future because I think that's absolutely impossible. And I don't like books that try to predict the future, except that I chose the one most predictable aspect of the future, which is what's happening to the Earth. And, my experience going to Montana for the past 25 years is that we used to be able to go out there and count on clear skies. I mean, that's what we loved about it so much. I called the book Dream State partly because you feel like you're in a dream when you're there because the clarity is so extraordinary. And you can see forever. I mean, they don't call it the big sky state for nothing. But the past maybe 5 to 7 years, we've been going out there. We're so excited to get to Montana. We get there, and because of the wildfire smoke, and not just, I mean, sometimes it's wildfire smoke that's local, it's from Montana, but often it's from Oregon or Washington and Canada, and it drifts right over Montana, and the air quality index is so high that we can't go outside. And if we do go outside, we have to wear masks. My father-in-law, who sent himself through Harvard, he grew up in Missoula, in a blue-collar household. He sent himself through Harvard by being a hotshot, fighting fires in the forest. He's already has smoke damage, so for him, he has to crouch inside next to the air purifier with like 3 masks on, and he has laryngitis. So it's really changed. It's become much more dire. One thing that happened as I was writing the book is that things got worse than I expected. And so I had to go back, because it took me years to write, I had to go back and change things and make them more dire, because I was just out in Montana, it was 105, I was like, whoa. So, I had to make things worse. I wrote a chapter about fires in LA. There's a whole chapter that begins with Griffith Park on fire and the Hollywood sign burning up like shrinky dinks and stuff. And that was supposed to be 10 years from now. So.
Well, it's important that we testify to these things because it's happening faster than we can conceive or even write. And yet, it's within our memory. So I have to tell my kids, there were once these things called fireflies. And when I would come to the river here, they would be floating, and we would always see fireflies. So those are gone.
Yeah.
I don't think you have to be told that something's missing or absent. We have to name it and give voice to it, and bring it to life if it has any chance at all. And that's one of the things I loved about your book. I really felt like I was in the woods. I felt like I was in the fields of flowers on that glacial mountain, and I did feel the skies, and I felt the smoke too, And I just remember being young in the Midwest, and I would go there every summer, and or the winter, seeing the migrating birds, hearing the bird song, turkeys in the yard, like things that are now very occasional, and making portraits of that, and the importance of the loss of that, I feel is so crucial. But how to do it—that's the big question.
Yeah, and I think we're giving a mistaken impression that the book is like a giant bummer. And the last thing you want to do, since you're living through it, is go read about it as well. And I think there are, since the whole Oprah business, there have been some, I've made the mistake of looking at my Amazon page, and, the sort of Oprah machine has packaged it as, is this going on the internet? Okay, I'll just finish.
Wonderful Oprah.
She is wonderful.
Yeah,
she's wonderful. And I feel only gratitude towards it. And I don't even think it's Oprah, but the whole machine, the media machine, has sort of packaged it as being inspirational, and it's not an inspirational book. That said, I did consciously want to write, and the first book is very sort of like, I wouldn't say it's meta about this, but it's definitely very conscious of this. I love those old Russian novels so much. They're my favorite novels. And my experience with contemporary fiction is a little bit fraught sometimes, because I'll pick up a book that has gotten a lot of attention, and I love the voice. I think it's funny. The character is great. And I read about 50 pages, and then the character stops behaving like a human being and becomes an alien and is responding to things in an emotional way that's so bizarre to me, that is psychopathic. And I'm like, no human being reacts emotionally to these things in that way. And so I wanted at least the first part of the book to sort of step backward a little bit and to try to capture, in the way that I'm not saying that the book aspires towards this, capture just like the vicissitudes of human emotion, all of them. I wanted it to be happy and funny and sad and joyous and despairing and all that stuff, because that's the way that I navigate the world. I feel all those things every day, on a daily basis. I feel the entire gamut of human experience, and I wanted that in the book because that's what I miss. I miss from some contemporary fiction.
I think your book is big-hearted and deeply felt. I thought it was very warm work. And you alluded to that you do a little structural work, a little elision, a little prestidigitation, to try to move the reader without losing any propulsion, through collapsing lives. And but I thought the ending was very beautiful. When did you know you were going to have that great ending?
Well, I don't want to give anything away, but there is the ending is a sort of repeat of something that's glanced at earlier, a moment, important moment of the book, and then you don't really get the full disclosure of that moment until the very ending, and I wanted to achieve this effect of like, okay, well, here is a possible future if this kind of stunning betrayal had never happened, both the stunning betrayal of the characters, but also the stunning betrayal of the Earth. If that had never happened, this maybe would have been what the future was like. And I liked the effect of, I mean, the book is called Dream State. I like the effect of this sort of like two different ghostly possibilities that could have happened. And that sheds this kind of retrospective, destabilizing sort of reality on everything that you just read, as if this life was a dream. It could have been a different dream. You could have had a different dream, right? And that I had no idea how to end the book. I was working towards the ending, and I didn't want to end it the obvious place. If you've read the book, you might know what I'm talking about. I didn't want to end it there because it was too obvious. I got to Yaddo, which is this writing residency in upstate New York. I had 2 weeks because I can only ever go away for 2 weeks because I have kids, you know. I got there. I spent the first week pulling my hair out in total misery. Like, I'm wasting these 2 weeks. I don't know how to end this book. I was crushed about it. And then I figured out I was going to go back to that earlier moment and kind of rewrite it. And when I figured it out, I started crying. I was so relieved and happy. And I was really fun at dinner that night. Yeah. Whereas I'd been moping in my room the entire time. So, yeah, it was like one of those breakthrough moments that almost never happened to me, like the true breakthrough, you know, like a flash of lightning bolts. So.
Do you know when you've begun a book? Like, you know, like, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to write a novel. Or does it brew in you? Do you end up doing, like, find yourself doing research? Like, when I wrote The Overmaster's Son, I wasn't writing that book. I had to get money to pay the rent because we had 3 small kids. I sold a book on, what do you call it? Speculation.
Yeah.
And so I was like it was the most horrible book idea in the world. And
what was it? What was it?
And I was trying, but while I was trying to do this book, I became kind of obsessed with North Korea. And for like a year, I was just reading about stories of defectors, and I'd be like, I was really fascinated by all this stuff. And I'd be like, oh God, I have to go write this book for Viking, you know? And then, I don't know, all 3 of my books have been that way, where I'm just like obsessed. I don't know that I'm really researching something. Like, you get interested in the natural world, you get obsessed about a place, characters start to take up residence, and suddenly you realize you've been pre-writing for like a long time. Like, how does the formulations operate? Because I know we've got some writers in the room.
Yeah, no, I think that's a pretty apt characterization of it. I don't really remember when I first started writing the book, but I do remember it was percolating because I was so interested in the setting, and I thought I wanted to write sort of both a love letter to the setting, but also an elegy to it. And so I was thinking about that. I mean, writing a novel, as you know, it's such an act of faith. It's almost like believing in God, despite the fact that you know the universe is godless. You really have no idea whether the book is even going to become not just like a beautiful book, but even a book, right? When you start, those of us who have written novels, you know, when you begin a novel, you have no idea if it's even going to become a novel, and you can spend years on this novel without knowing. So, extraordinary amount of faith involved. I think I started the book, but I was feeling I always feel. I have a lot of ideas for novels. I never know which one is the idea. But I think as I've gotten older, and this is my second novel, I have 2 collections of short stories, I've gotten better at realizing there isn't the idea, right? The idea is the one you randomly choose and then put your soul into, you know? And so I just finally was like, okay, I'm just going to try this one. You know, this is the idea for me at the moment, at least. And then I went and I talked to this guy, Doug Chadwick, who's a wildlife biologist in Montana, who lives in Whitefish. He writes great books about being a wildlife biologist. And he started telling me about tracking wolverines and about searching for these incredibly solitary, elusive creatures in the snow, and all of how the effects of global warming are compromising the wolverine population. And I think I just thought, symbol. I mean, it was just this idea, and I also, since I'm a really, there's a lot of skiing in the book, and I'm a very avid skier. I come from this family of insane ski maniacs. I can't even explain it. Two of them live in Utah. They go helicopter skiing all the time. They just got back from a trip in Japan where they skied for a month, and they see people die. And I've gone backcountry skiing, and I've never been in an avalanche, but I've heard these stories about avalanches from my siblings. I knew that there was going to be an avalanche death in the book, and when I heard Wolverine searching for something in the snow, and I thought about this character who might spend his life searching for something he can't find in the snow, and I think that's when the light bulb went off.
Damn, I want to write that down.
Too late.
Yeah. Have you encountered a Wolverine?
We saw Wolverine, yeah, and not when I was with Doug Chadwick, but I was just walking with my kids. We go to Glacier and we stay up there for like 4 days every summer, in addition to going to the lake and stuff. And we've seen tons of. My wife and I were stalked by a grizzly bear. We just see tons of wildlife when you're up there. And you go to the other side of the park, and the Many Glacier side, and there's just so many bears and stuff up there, and it's so cool. Moose everywhere, and we were walking, and my son, who was quite small at the time, he looked across way away on this glacier that's melting. That was maybe a mile away, and he saw this tiny little speck that was scrambling up the glacier, and it looked like a cross between a bear and a badger. And as soon as I said that, I said, I know what that is.
Right.
It's a Wolverine. And so I've seen one from a great distance, and they're very elusive. I know of no other hikers who've randomly encountered a Wolverine, so I felt very blessed, because I was working on the book at that time, and it felt like a sign from God.
That sounds like a sign from God. I just want to observe that I feel like back in the day, when I would go to a literary reading, one of the things I loved is for the reader to cast the spell with a long reading. The 20-minute reading, the 30-minute reading, at a university, maybe a 40-minute reading, and go hear, Tim O'Brien read a whole story, And I feel like encountering the book is what was happening. And the conversation is now how it works, and has worked this way for some time. And I feel like it's about encountering the author. And I feel like sometimes the book is a souvenir of having met an author. Does that make sense? I've been at events and I've signed a book for someone, and I've thought, you're not going to read that book. So sometimes I'll buy a book and I'll be like, hey, I want to remember this event, and this book isn't maybe not for me, but I want this book on my shelf. I know you're a very kind of charming, engaging person. How are you being dragged into the light for this stuff? How are you with you being up here?
I have no complaints whatsoever, honestly. I have been toiling in semi-obscurity for a long time. I do, there's a guy who came to my reading at Powell's last night who had all of my books, and he'd been a fan from the beginning.
Yeah.
He even had like the literary magazines, like where I published stories, and he wanted me to sign everything. Wow. And that was really meaningful to me, that here was somebody who was in it from the beginning. And I don't encounter that many lifelong Puchner fans, it was really remarkable to me. So that said, it's been a long road for me, and I've written 4 books. This is my 4th. I'm 55, I think. Yeah, good God. So to have this happen suddenly, out of the blue, really, I was sitting in a subcommittee meeting. I was just telling my friends I was sitting in a subcommittee meeting, and we had just been talking about forming a committee on committees. And I was like, please kill me now. And my publicist said, I need to talk to you. And so I went and I don't get good cell reception in my office. So I went and sat in my tiny electric car in this kind of depressing parking lot at Johns Hopkins, and Oprah Winfrey called me. And,
she called you?
She called me, oh yeah. She called me. Part of the narrative is sort of surprising the author, right? So I thought it was my publicist calling, and then there was an unlisted member. I said, well, for some reason he's calling on an unlisted. I was kind of annoyed, actually. I was, because I really wanted to talk about the committee on committees. And then I got this call, and I answered, and it was Oprah Winfrey. So it really felt like it had come out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And I have friends who are just brilliant, wonderful writers who struggle to publish their books because their books don't make a ton of money. I can only say that I feel really, really, really lucky. And I will say this about Oprah, like she's, I've read lots of reviews of my work, and none of the reviewers ever talk about the language, almost never. Ron Charles does, but almost nobody ever talks about the language. And Oprah was all about the language. When she interviewed me for this podcasting, she would pluck out these sentences and we'd parse them together, and they were all sort of like sentences I was secretly proud of as well. She's a close, smart reader.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Okay, questions for our author today?
Yeah.
Could you see Montana as almost like a character in the book, as like a geographic place? I get the environmental aspect, but do you also feel that Montana represents symbolically like the old Wild West and the frontier? And is that a myth in your book, or is that a reality?
Yeah, that's a good question. It certainly is a character in the book, and not just the landscape itself, but the house is a character. And I think I was focused on the landscape and both trying to capture the beauty of the landscape, but also the poignancy of the loss of that beauty very much. I don't think I was consciously thinking about the myth of the Wild West, but certainly you can't go to Montana without thinking about that and without feeling that sense of freedom and possibility, just because it's so huge. I mean, the other thing about Montana is that it's changing a lot, and in the last few years in particular, a lot of Californians are buying houses and causing the real estate market to go through the roof, and a lot of the ranches are sort of turning into celebrity ranches and that sort of thing, and that's finally happening to our little corner. I say our, right? It's not mine at all, but to this northwestern part of Montana as well, and there is a lot of resentment about that, and for good reason. That's such a huge topic. The politics of that is that I just decided not to wade into it. I was going to write like a carpetbaggers, Montana novel. I'm not a Montanan. I was. Most of the characters are from outside of Montana. They're the problem, really. And so I wasn't going to stake a claim on Montana or anything like that.
So you say. There's what's that Flanagan book, The Eternal Frontier? It's like 13,000 years of Montana and Wyoming, and about Montana was once, mastodons, mammoths, glyptodonts, camels, horses, scimitar cats, and has been continuously occupied since the Clovis and Folsom complexes. And so there's your sequel.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, prequel. Prequel. There's a man back there.
Eric, there's a sentence on page 155 of your book that starts with, "He got his shovel out." And it continues to the end of the paragraph. I wonder if you'd be so kind as to read it.
Wow, that's
I'd like to hear how you say it.
Okay, sure.
Wonderful sentences I've ever read.
Wow, I'm looking for it. This is the avalanche part. Well, I already gave it away that there's an avalanche and a death, right? So there's no spoiler, really. I already spoiled it. Sure. This is the end of that scene. No one's ever asked me during the Q&A to read a sentence before. I like that. Thank you. Okay. He got his shovel out of his pack and yelled at Charlie to dig behind him farther downhill. And Garrett began to dig as swiftly as he could, shoveling snow so dense it felt like cement, his arms burning, tossing each bladeful as far downhill as possible, not daring to stop, even for a second, the wind biting a hole into his cheek. And he dug and 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 dropped out of college and wandered between rooms and fell in love with his only friend's fiance and was still digging.
Yeah.
Tom.
I wondered if you could talk a little. I mean, you talked about loving the Russians in the first part of it, and if you read it, you're reading different books almost, and it's all part of the same book. But it's got that kind of Anna Karenina, and it's sweeping, and I was describing it as a sort of book you want to jump in and stop characters from doing certain things at different times. You feel connected in that way, but the challenge of having something that's quite satisfying, then moving on and starting something new within the same book, and then also having each one achieve very different things, but making sure that each section is as strong or stronger as the previous one. The challenge that you create by accomplishing something quite impressive in the beginning. Do you know what I'm saying? As you're moving on. I mean, I know I read this as you were going along, but I mean, it's like even I know there, and also, do you jump ahead, or were you working, for those who find it hard to believe, or hard to imagine doing, spanning all those years?
Yeah, well, I mean, it wasn't easy. I wrote many drafts, and you read an earlier draft. You helped me immensely with the book. So, I mean, I wrote a lot of those chapters that I ended up eliding and taking out of the book. So I wrote them, but I liked the emotional effect of them not there. And then I skipped things that I discovered that I needed. And so I wrote between chapters as well. But mostly I took out. Even the first section, which is much more conventional in terms of its structure, it was much too long. It was far too long. It was disproportionate. So I had to take a bunch of chapters out. In fact, this happened with my first book as well. I had to take out the funniest chapter. That happened with Model Home. Like, my agent and my editor decided I needed to take out the funniest chapter because it was redundant, and there's a chapter in here that was like, made me laugh out loud when I read it, and I just had a great time writing, and my agent and editor both agreed it was the funniest chapter, but that it was too funny, and that it was totally sort of off-putting. It was sort of disrupting the tonal balance of the book because it was a little bit slapstick, and so they wanted me to take it out, and I think it was the right decision. But so a lot of painful decisions like that. Yeah, Steve.
You guys talked about like sort of going forward in your fourth book. Were there any lessons in the first three or habits that you had developed? You said, I'm not going to do this again.
That's a really good question. Adam?
Waiting to hear the answer. I mean, the thing is, like, when you written a novel, you're like, okay, oof. You're just afraid of failing because they're notoriously so difficult, and you feel like you're going to climb Everest, and then it's more difficult than you thought. Then you feel like, okay, I know how to write a novel, but the truth is, like, you learn how to write that novel, and you're never going to write that one again, and you have to start over completely from scratch. But that's also what's amazing about them. That's what's thrilling and terrifying and invigorating. And I feel like if something I've learned is, like, if you don't feel like you're on that tightrope, if you don't feel like failure is really possible at any moment, if you're not pulling your hair out, you're probably in big trouble.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. If you're not risking it and you feel like this novel will never be published, then you're not trying something new. You're not. I mean, I think with short stories, I became so comfortable writing short stories because I sort of knew where the furniture was and how to move it around, and I knew rhetorically how an ending was supposed to sound, and that sort of like Chekhov ideal of the eternal ending that is like negative capability, all that jazz. I felt like and because I've taught short stories for so long, and I felt I was in danger of it hardening into a shtick, and the way that I dealt with that when I was writing stories is that they got weirder and weirder, and I think my second book of short stories alienated some people because some of the stories are kind of weird, and I just felt like when I was writing this novel, it was like a relief. Like, I don't know how to write a novel, and I have no preconception of what a novel is supposed to do because novel can do anything. And so I think that it was both terrifying, but also kind of a great relief to be writing a novel. And also short stories, you work on them for years. It takes me so long. I always think, I'll get a short story collection done in a couple of years. It takes me forever, and then you have a story collection, and few people read short stories. So it can be a little demoralizing in that way as well.
They also waste all your beginnings and endings. All your good endings. People say to me, "Oh, hey, will you read my book?" Oh, I outlined it for a year before I went after it. No, I'm just like, no. I just don't want to read a book that's written under 2 years.
Yeah.
I just really don't. And no offense to the great writers who can really do that.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I'm talking about normal people rather than amazing people. But
Yeah, and there's also this idea with the novel. I mean, Nabokov, it's probably his fault, but he said that you're an amateur if you don't know exactly what's going to happen, like in every page of your novel. But I don't know anybody who writes novels that way. Do you? I mean, everyone I know writes novels in an exploratory fashion, and I mean, that's what's fun about it for me. I have an idea what the emotional effect is I want, but I don't know what's going to happen in the novel when I start. I mean, that whole adage, if you don't surprise yourself as a writer, you're not going to surprise the reader, it seems very true to me. But it's also what makes it gratifying and fun.
I think it's the biggest misconception about writers is that they know what they're doing.
Yeah.
I try to just help my students understand that.
Yeah.
That it is about, I think contemporary literary fiction is most in conversation with improvisational jazz. You know, and the jazz artist has a sound, they're in conversation, they have a tradition, they have their way, and then they go.
Right.
That's why most jazz is so bad. But when it hits, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. John.
Well, you're obviously a writer, but you're many other things, I know.
Yeah.
Would you mind talking a little bit about I think your day job? You're a teacher
Mm-hmm.
and a professor at Johns Hopkins. And can you just tell us a little bit about how that works and how your work intersects with your classroom?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's tough. I became an academic because I had to. I do love teaching. I really do love teaching, and I think it's a good job for a writer because it complements that kind of solitary cave person aspect of writing. You know, to get out of teaching is performative. It gets you out of the house. You have to sort of communicate clearly and helpfully to people. And I like that. I mean, it's a good balance. It achieves a good life balance for me. But there certainly have been major sacrifices. You know, I've been writing for many, many years, and I only have 4 books. And it's partly because I teach so much, but it's also partly because I have 2 children. And I decided a long time ago, before I had kids, that I didn't want, when I was on my deathbed, you know, I was deciding between having, 10 books and no loved ones at my side, or 6 books surrounded by loved ones. It was a no-brainer for me. I was like 10 books. And then I accidentally got, no, it was the other one. So it's never been a huge issue for me. Not that it isn't frustrating. I do get frustrated when I don't have enough time to write. But you just figure it out. You find the time. You just have to, because I start to become really miserable and a really annoying husband and father when I haven't been writing for a while, like now. So you find the time.
Maybe we have time for one more question.
Yeah.
When you're writing a book that long, presumably you're reading a lot of other novels along the way. Like, what does that do to your rhythm and your style, and like, how's that work?
That's a really good question. Yeah, our old professor and friend Tobias Wolff, he told me once that he never read any contemporary fiction when he was writing, and he was always writing. So I was like, "Well, you don't read any contemporary fiction," but he would go back to the and read the writers that he knew he couldn't compete with, and so he wasn't in a, it wasn't a question of being overly influenced by Chaucer. I don't know who he was reading. Probably Turgenev or something, right? So, for me, I have to read fiction all the time because I teach it, right? So I don't have that luxury not to, and I teach a fair amount of contemporary fiction. But I have this class that I teach to the grad students, which it has this really pretentious title. It's called The Writer's Bookshelf, Unsung Novels That Writers Love. And so my solution is to choose some sort of semi-obscure books that other writers have foisted on me that a lot of people have never heard of. And for some reason that makes it easier. I don't know. But yeah, no, I mean, I'm always reading things. I feel like once you're in that rhythm and you've found this voice and sensibility of whatever book it's not even voice. Like, I mean, people talk about a young writer finding his or her, their voice. That never made any sense to me, because there are plenty of writers that have manifold voices, right? But sensibility, like, I mean, I think the trick is discovering what your sensibility is. And I feel more and more comfortable with that sensibility with each book. I think once you've found that, it's more impervious to outside influence, because you've already digested all those influences, right? And come up with this weird cocktail of, like, you know, I don't know, 40% you, 10% Joy Williams. What's left? I'm bad at math. 60% Adam Johnson, right?
I don't think influence is a worry, but filling your head with narratives when you're trying to, I think when a book is on the upswing and you're in the new generational phase, having too many narratives in your head is not good. Once you've got your foothold,
Right.
Nothing can dislodge what you're working on. That's your baseline. It's a good question, though. How about you when you work on your novel?
I haven't started yet. I'll get back to you.
Homework assigned. Homework assigned. First sentence.
Well, thank you all for coming out on this.
Yeah. Okay, it's time to sign some books.
Okay.
Let's do it.
All right.
Okay.
Oh, before you're released, can we give one more hand for Eric Puchner?